Welcome to Tell Us Something. Thanks for coming, everybody. Okay, so I'm sorry, MCAT, I'm going to get the words wrong. But I must say at the beginning that this performance is going to be recorded by MCAT as a part of their grant to nonprofits and will be available on MCAT sometime in the future. Thank you to the bookstore at the University of Montana for their continued support. Thank you to Missoula Community Foundation for their fiscal sponsorship. And one of the new things that we're going to try tonight is a little interactive thing. When you walked in, you got a little sheet of paper, and on it you had a chance to write a short story about why didn't anyone tell me sometime in your life when that might have happened. At both sides at both bars, there are some round little boxes. If you put your story in that box at intermission, which is also a new thing, at intermission we'll have some volunteers from the audience that I'll need to, somebody want to volunteer, we'll talk about that at intermission. Some volunteers will go grab those boxes, bring them up on stage, and we'll pull names out of or pull stories out of that box. And we'll read some of your stories from the stage. Some of those stories might end up on Twitter or places like that too, but it's all anonymous, so it's going to be super fun. The other thing on that little sheet, and the tear off the bottom part that you keep, it says that the next show is June 21st. It's actually June 22nd. We had an event get booked at the Top Hat, and we have to be flexible because that's how that venue works, and that's how this venue works. We have to respect the Top Hat and the Wilma. And by the way, thanks to the Top Hat and the Wilma for all of their many, many years of support. The other thing that I'll say about that bottom sheet is there's a hip-hop show tomorrow night at the Top Hat, and so the expiration for that coupon, 25% off an appetizer with the purchase of a meal, that is actually extended through the rest of the month. So show your support to the Top Hat for their support of Tell Us Something. That would be incredible. Okay, so we have 9 storytellers on the roster tonight. Each storyteller has 10 minutes to tell his or her story. All of the stories are true, and all of the stories are told from memory. Tell Us Something is a celebration of live storytelling, of listening to each other, and of community. Each Tell Us Something event has a theme, and tonight's theme is, Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me? Susan Hansen is proud to be the 7th and final daughter of the daughter of the daughter of the daughter, you get it? To have lived in Virginia City, Montana. She loves creating art in many mediums, especially watercolors and stained glass. When she's not doing these things, she's likely listening to a story or telling a story at Toastmasters or in the private home of an elderly person. Please welcome Susan Hansen.
Some of the best times of my life have been when I spent time as a non-traditional student at Montana Tech. Yes! I had no idea that I was a nerd. I loved learning. And this school opened up just a whole new world for me. I loved meeting the professors who were so passionate about their work. There were actually two professors married to each other who stood out to me. They did a lot of civic work. They were active with Big Brothers and Sisters. On a few days of the year, they would put on a chemistry show for middle schoolers to entice them to become scientists in chemistry like they were. And, you know, I love a clever license plate. Whenever I drove over by the chemistry department, I would see their two little twin cars, and the license plates each said, Pairdox. Well, as much as I loved Montana Tech, I did not want to continue to have to drive by the house where my former fiance's truck was parked at his new fiance's house. I told everybody that I was going to Missoula because I wanted to study psychology, and I did want to study psychology, but I needed a change of scenery really bad. So Missoula, here I come, and it was a town of peace and love. I knew that because there was a peace sign up on the hill. Well, those professors at Montana Tech that I liked so well with the clever license plate, I did know a little bit about their research. Their research involved a drug called Taxol. They were having a lot of problems getting their drug accepted by the medical community as a treatment for breast cancer. Pretty soon, I found myself with some lumps on the side here. And I didn't think about it too often, except in the bathtub, and then the rest of the day I'd forget about it. But one day, it was October, which is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I was driving past my doctor's office, and on the radio it said, Breast Cancer Awareness Month, get yourself checked, and I did. Well, I just knew that eventually, after appointment, after appointment, after appointment, that one of those doctors was going to say, oh no, it's nothing. I was prepared for that. I was not prepared for the day when they said, yes, you've got it. And I had to have surgery. Surgery is kind of a nice word for saying mastectomy, and mastectomy is a nice word for saying they're going to cut me. They did. 3 weeks after that, I got to start chemotherapy. One of the chemotherapy drugs was called Taxol. So I thought about those two professors, Don and Andrea Sturley, every once in a while in kind of a passing way. Well, I thought about them a lot when I looked in the mirror and I didn't have any hair. I did 8 rounds of chemotherapy, then I did radiation, and I did reconstruction. This is plastic. The miracles of modern medicine, they're amazing. And so many of us who are afflicted with cancer go on to live long, long, long lives. I'm one such lucky person. That's been 11 and a half years since I had that surgery. I went back to work. I went to work for Corporation Fuck You. I got to work on the phones. Thank you for calling Corporation Fuck You. My name is Susan. How are you today? That job was killing me. I survived cancer to work this job. Every day I complained to my brother. I said, they did this and they did that, and it's awful. I just can't stand it any longer. He said, well, why don't you go to work on road construction? You can work in the same environment where I work. Me? Really? Road construction? Yes, you can be a flagger. You go downtown to the Union Hall, sign up, they'll train you. They did. They trained me very well. They called me a traffic control technician. Very powerful. And they told me that my job was safety, and the first person that I had to keep safe was myself. It's the same as the old story about being on an airplane with the oxygen mask, and you need to put your own oxygen on first. And so I had to keep myself safe first, too. I had to keep the people who were driving through road construction safe, and I needed to be aware of the safety of others working on there. It was a different world. I loved it. It was awful. It was hot. I stood on my feet sometimes 13 hours a day, and you're not allowed to sit because it psychologically takes your attention away from your job of keeping everyone safe. So I stood with my sign and my hard hat and my boots. You know, on the first day, I arrived on the construction site, and I tried to act like I knew what I was doing. But I had shiny boots and a shiny new road construction hat. And on my radio, there was a little button that said MON. Over the radio, I said, now, tomorrow's Tuesday. Will I get a new radio or a new button? And they loved that. They knew I was a rookie right away. I made friends with every car that I stopped. Well, with every person who was driving the car. And I told them that they needed to drive 25 miles per hour. They needed to follow closely. And then I would get to talk to them, and I got to hear so many stories. If you think you get to hear stories here, well, I got to hear stories all day long. It was the best job for me. Well, one day, I got to see lots of clever license plates, by the way. One day, there was a license plate that drove up, and it said DNA. I wonder what that stands for. Well, I told the occupants of the car the whole spiel about how fast they could drive. And they seemed like they were having fun. And pretty soon, I looked really close at their faces, and I said, are you two professors at Montana Tech? They said, well, yes, we are. Did you used to take some of our classes? Have you been our student? No, I've never been your student, but I certainly did use your drug Taxol. I know that you were having a lot of trouble having that accepted by the medical community, and you must have been successful, because here I am to prove that that's a great drug. It was the most wonderful reunion that I think that I have ever had in my life. Pretty soon, it was time for them to drive off with the pilot car. And I was so sad to see them go. Don stuck his head out the window, and he said, thank you. And I said, no, thank you. Nobody ever told me that I would be able to say thank you to the scientists who developed the drug that saved my life. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. This way, okay. Dagney Deutchman is a life enthusiast. She collects postcards and people wherever she travels and tries incredibly hard to shower on a regular basis. She has worked as a river guide on the main and middle fork of the Salmon for nearly 8 seasons and happily falls off the face of the earth to do this each summer. When she is in civilization, she can be found tangoing, writing poetry, cooking for her friends, and trying to finish up her bachelor's degree in psychology. Before she dies, Dagney would like to learn how to ride a bike with no hands and ride in a hot air balloon. And I wonder if she wants to do that at the same time. Dagney, come on in. Welcome, Dagney.
The summer that I was 20, my life kind of fell apart around me. I came from a really stable home, and all of a sudden my parents were having marital problems. I had been a dancer my whole life, and all of a sudden my hips weren't really working, and I couldn't do what I wanted to do the most. I got fired from a job that I really loved, and of course I found myself in like the 18th or 19th heartbreak of my life, because, you know, I fall in love every single day, so. Before I continue on with this story, I think it's important to know what I do in the summer, which has kind of already been introduced. But there's this joke that, how do you know somebody is a river guide? Well, they'll tell you. So I'm a river guide, and I work these multi-day trips, and there's almost nothing that I love more than this. I get to show people their public lands. I get to wake up every single morning not having slept under a roof or a tent, because if it rains, I mostly just roll under the nearest kitchen table. I adore getting to hear the stories of people who come and save up for years to just spend a week outside with me. So this is where I would introduce the character Ken. I knew Ken was going to be a problem child the moment that I met him. And by child, I mean this guy was like 35. He was not a child. So Ken had gotten this river trip on the main Salmon with his girlfriend, and they had found it on like a Groupon site or something along the lines of this. So it was discounted heavily, because this kind of guy would never be on this sort of a trip. And I say that affectionately because so many different people from so many different walks of life come on these river trips with me. But it was pretty obvious to me that Ken had never even been outside before. And I know this because the first thing that he said to me was, "So where do we poop?" And this is not that uncommon of a question. Being outside, especially if you're not used to it, that can be kind of an intimidating experience for a lot of people. And I'm just laughing that I'm sharing this story because I don't talk about poop with my friends. This is like not a normal thing for me. So I'm just laughing that this is the story I chose to tell. Excuse me, the river trips that I do, we have this really sophisticated system. It's called the groover. And the groover was traditionally this big rocket box. It was like a big square army can, and you sat directly on it, and it gave you grooves on your butt, and that's why it's called a groover. This is much more sophisticated at this point. Right now, we've got these really nice, they're called Johnny Partners, and they're these like big aluminum boxes. They have handles for guides to carry with ease. We put a nice, beautiful toilet seat on them so people can pretend that they're inside and comfortable. And we usually set these up like way away from other people in camp, and it's usually in this beautiful setting. And honestly, it's my very favorite place to go to the bathroom, so I'm not sure why other people struggle with this. So when I received this question from Ken, where do we poop? I was like, okay, I've got this. I've dealt with people like this before. I'll just explain to him. And I was like, Ken, I'm really glad that you asked. Put on my happy river guide face. And I walked him over and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna take this moment to show everyone in camp. So everyone come over here. This is how we do this. This is our hand wash system. You'll know that someone's in the bathroom because they take this paddle with them. So if the paddle's gone, you know not to go over there. When the paddle's back, that means the bathroom's open. Yada, yada, I do my spiel. So after I do this whole spiel, I can tell that this wasn't really the answer that he was looking for. He's kind of got this face on like, huh. And I knew that that's not what he was getting at. So here I am, a year from having my life fall apart on me, and this was the summer that everything was gonna go right. And Ken was just messing it up for me. So every conversation the whole week, Ken and I were just talking about different ways that he was trying to go to the bathroom in the woods and different ways that I didn't want to let him. I was very stubborn about it. So, Dagney, what would happen if, like, the groover was full? He would ask me. And I'd just lie. I'd be like, we don't have that happen ever. That's not a thing. And so he'd come up with more and more elaborate schemes asking me, like, what if, what if, what if? I think my favorite one was like, so if you guys left me here and you like forgot to pick me up and I was stuck out here by myself, I was like, well, there's probably another group a day behind us, so you would just pick up with them. None of these answers were satisfactory to him, but I thought that I was super clever in just deviating him so that he would just forget about this whole topic. So the very last morning, we're at this beautiful camp, and it's called California, and it's this huge sandy beach. It's the last morning. The night before, we had played a bunch of games as a camp. We had finished off the rest of our beer. We had a really great meal. And I was the trip leader that week, so I was making sure that we were getting out of camp on time. I was making sure the boats were packed correctly. I was kind of scattered and going everywhere. And this was my last trip that I was leading that summer, so I was feeling really proud of myself and accomplished after like kind of picking my life back up and just being determined to make the best of things. And as I'm finishing up the last things, we have this moment in the morning, and it's a very important moment because it's when we're putting the toilet away. And so, as every good river guide knows, you have this one final call in the bathroom because there's inevitably that one person who forgot to go. So, before you take down the toilet, which is the very last thing that you pack in your boats, you go, last call on the groover! And if no one runs, then you're probably good to take it down. So I did my shout. I called the groover one last time, and no one came. So I was like, all right, I made it one more week out in the wilderness. Everyone was happy. Everyone had some really successful trips and good memories. You know what? I'm just gonna go take down the toilet for the rest of the crew. Like, normally this isn't my specific job on this crew, but I'm gonna go do it anyway because I'm in a really good mood. So, the place that the bathroom is set up at California Creek, it's beautiful. There's a creek on the upstream side of this camp, and it's shaded, and it's kind of dark, and we set up the toilet right next to this creek. And there's some fresh mint that happens to grow kind of near there. So it's this very like serene fairy garden feel when you're heading over that direction. And I'm feeling like I've got things going on. I'm in a pretty good mood, and so I start to head that direction. And as I turn the corner to right where you would start to see the toilet, but that you couldn't see anyone else in camp, so you're in this like little limbo land between toilet land and camp land, there's 3 very distinct rocks stacked on top of each other. And I camp here pretty frequently in the summer, But I'd never seen these rocks cairned quite in this way. So there's 3 huge rocks cairned on top of each other. And on top of the 3 rocks was this beautiful Dairy Queen swirl of a poop with toilet paper as like the whipped cream on top. Now, I only had one guest all week who was asking me where to poop. What if this happened? Dagney, if the world was blowing up and I really needed to go to the bathroom, where would I go? And I just flat out told him in the groover every time, but I knew that he was gonna pull something like this. So, in having such a frustrating year the year before, and feeling like I kind of had my shit together then, I just collected myself, I gloved up, I grabbed a trash can, and I thought, man, you know, a lot of people told me that as you grow up, you have to learn how to deal with some shit. But why didn't anyone ever tell me that it wouldn't be mine?
Ain't that some shit? Thanks, Dagney. Jennie Pack was born in Kalispell, Montana, and has deep Montana roots. A love of history and theater led her to her current stint as a living history presenter for Humanities Montana. Jennie travels the state performing her 1-hour programs at libraries, schools, assisted living facilities, and museums. In her day job, she's a senior care provider for Home Instead Senior Care, where the biggest perk is listening to stories from her clients. In her spare time, Jennie helps as a volunteer organizer for Stories and Stones, an annual historical storytelling event in Missoula. Please welcome Jennie Pack.
Hi, everybody. Winter in Hong Kong is just a little bit different than winter in Montana. The daily temperature is about 75 or 80 degrees, and the humidity is around 99.9999%. All the time, it sticks to your face. It's like a thin film. You need to wash your face all the time. And my husband had taken me to Hong Kong to see where he had spent the first 23 years of his life, and visit his family and meet his friends. And I quickly learned that the 3 major pastimes in Hong Kong are shopping, walking, and eating. And we did those every day, 9 or 10 hours a day. Now, the evening of the 3rd day, I found myself hobbling from the train to the apartment on painfully swollen feet and ankles. This is something that had never happened to me before, and I'm going through things in my head, what could be causing this condition. It's not my shoes. And I don't think it's all the walking, but I bet the humidity has something to do with it. I felt a little bit like a raisin that had been dropped in a glass of water. I blew up. So that night I slept with my feet elevated, and by morning they did resemble human feet again. But partway through that next day, they swelled up again. And I told my husband that something was going on, it's not quite right, and we needed to make a little adjustment to our routine. So he had a chat with his brother, Thomas, who happens to be a Chinese medicine doctor. Convenient, right? And Thomas decided that we should go for our outings in a private car, so we didn't have to run to the bus, run to the train, run here, run there. So the next day they came and took us out, and we drove all around and saw the sights. And then they took me to this beach at a place called Repulse Bay. But it was really nice. It was beautiful. And it was deserted because it was wintertime. It was actually March, but it was wintertime in their minds, and nobody went to the beach in the wintertime. And I don't know if you've been to a big city. There was 9 million people in Hong Kong, and they all wanted to be right where I was all the time. So this beach was heavenly. And I took my shoes off, and I walked in the cool sand, and then I put my feet in the soothing waters of the South China Sea. And my husband likes to say, you know, it's just the Pacific Ocean. But the South China Sea sounds so much more exotic. And it was really nice. It was soothing on my swollen feet. And then this big tour bus pulled up and deposited about 3 dozen mainland Chinese tourists who were all bundled up in parkas to ward off the balmy breezes of the winter in Repulse Bay. And I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to them, but I became quite a curiosity as I waded around in the water. And my husband came over, and he put his arm around me, and he said, "Nobody goes in the water in the wintertime. Come away and stop making a spectacle of yourself." That night at dinner, my brother-in-law, the Chinese medicine doctor, made a big deal about sitting next to me. We get along fine, but he doesn't speak much English, and there's not a lot of chatting going on. And his napkin fell on the floor, and he went under the table to retrieve it, and then it happened again, and then it happened again. And I looked down there, and he was trying to sneak a peek at my swollen ankles. I said, "Can I help you with something?" No. He started eating. And then I felt this light touch on my wrist, and I could hear him counting. He was taking my pulse. And I said, "Thomas, is there something you want to tell me?" No. He didn't want to tell me anything. So the next day, he comes to the apartment, and he has a huge thermos, and he plunks it on the table, and he takes the lid off, and the stench that wafted out, it was a Chinese medicine of some botanicals and desiccated bugs or something. And he said I had to drink a cup of it after every meal. And the food was really good. But a sewer water chaser puts you off your appetite, just like. And I said, "What's in that stuff?" And he just shook his head. And my husband said, "You don't want to know." And my brother-in-law, who doesn't speak much English, looked right at me and said in very clear English, "Drink it, it's good for you." That night, when we got back to the apartment, after another day out on the town, he set up his traveling medicine show and proceeded to do acupuncture on me in the middle of the living room in front of all of the relatives. And they're standing and watching. Oh. And they see my ankles. Oh. And he puts a needle in my leg, and on the end of it is this little wad of incense or something, I don't know what it was, and he lit it on fire. It's wafting up into the air. And he tells my husband to tell me to relax. Close your eyes. It's going to take about 20 minutes for this to burn off. Yes, of course, with everyone watching, it's very relaxing. We proceeded on in this fashion, the sewer water chaser after every meal, for 2 weeks. You get this little fruity flavored lozenge, though, after you drink the sewer water. You pop the lozenge in your mouth and suck on it. The fruity flavor doesn't quite cut the sewer water flavor, though. It did make me pee. I had to pee a lot, so that was the benefit of it. At the end of our trip, we took a bus to the airport, and my brother-in-law came along, and he and my husband sat in the bus and murmured seriously in Cantonese so that I wouldn't overhear, because I speak no Cantonese. But nobody told me what they were talking about. And we got on the plane, and my husband never said anything. And we took off into the air, and it's 16 hours from Hong Kong to Los Angeles. You do Tuesday twice. You arrive home an hour before you leave Hong Kong. And somewhere over the coast of Japan, my husband finally turned to me and he said, "Thomas would like you to see a doctor when we get home." And I said, "What else did Thomas say?" "Well, you might be going into renal failure or heart failure. But don't think about it now, just try to get some sleep." Now, I'm happy to say that the minute my feet touched the tarmac at Missoula International Airport, all the moisture was sucked out of my body. And I returned to my normal size. And it never happened again, so I didn't go to the doctor. Now, every time I ask my husband what's in that stuff, he just looks at me with this dreaded look on his face. You do not want to know. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennie. Whose phone's going off? Louie Woodrow Vero was born 1939 in Sacramento, California. He cowboyed after college in Idaho and Oregon and ended up on a dude ranch in Greeno, Montana, where he married the boss's daughter, and to paraphrase Winston Churchill, lived happily ever after. Welcome, Louie Vero.
How about there?
That looks good.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll start here in just a little bit. My parents came from the Philippine Islands and emigrated into the California coast, where I was born, as Mark said, in 1939. But he didn't say that I was born on the 4th of July. I don't know how they planned it, but that's what how it happened. My parents had a total of 5 children, and I was the last one. And after I was born, my parents divorced. And I always thought, and I never did ask, was it because of me? I did grow up in California, and I'd like to jump forward after telling you that my mother nicknamed me Cowboy because of the Filipinos folks' penchant for the Western heroes of the day, and surprisingly, they had a lot of friends that felt the same way. So She nicknamed me Cowboy. And you know how people are that way, they give you a name and hope you live up to it. So I don't know if I did anything with it then, but let's jump forward to when I went off to college at Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, California. And the school is well known for its agriculture department, its engineering department, and its national champion rodeo teams. Anyway, I was enrolled in the animal husbandry department, where we learned about swine, sheep, and beef cattle, dairy cattle, and horses. In my sophomore year, I enrolled in a colt starting class where these unbroke horses were donated to the school by folks around the school or raised colts from the university's herds. And I happened to bring along a 3-year-old buckskin gelding from home up in Sacramento, whose name was Henry. And all the students, there were about 10 to 12 of us, all the students got along pretty well, starting our colts in about 3 days or so, sacking them out, getting them saddled so that we could ride them. Except for this one particular young mare who, after you saddled her, would go over backwards and land on her saddle. But the young man who had him, Bill Boyd, had the horse, Bill Boyd, was very good at avoiding being squashed. And after, it was about the 8th week of the class, she was coming along pretty well and had stopped flipping over, so that the whole bunch of us were able to ride on campus anywhere through the units. And we had some cow pastures up above the campus, up in the hills and canyons, and that was great. There are 2 instances I'd like to tell you about that characterize, or what I can remember about the class. The first is we had Poly Royal, which is a campus-wide celebration, and it's billed as a county fair on a college campus. And it's a multi-day affair where it's an open house for all the departments. And there was a horse show at the rodeo arena, and I entered up, along with other members of that class I just took, in the Greenbroke colt class. And that was judged on way of going, either direction, at a walk, trot, and canter, with a stop and backing up. I am humble enough to say that my horse Henry won that class, and I was excited about that. The second instance I'd like to talk to you about is our class, toward the end, all got invited to a calf branding on one of the college's cattle herds. And it involved, first we'd go up and gather all the cattle out of the hills, then we'd separate the calves off the mothers, and in this particular time, we separated the calves into 2 bunches. One to be done with horses, students on horses, roping them and dragging them to the fire, and the other group were students on foot who gathered the calves and ran them up a chute. And I'm happy to say that we students on the horses really, and the horses our colts were super. They really did well, responded well. And I'm here to tell you that we outdid the folks with being on foot. I need to tell you that we dragged the calves up to the branding fire where students would process them by vaccinating them, marking them, worming them if they needed. So on from there to my graduation and after, I went to work for a feedlot in Idaho on the Snake River, where we had about 4,000 calves to take care of, and I was the only cowboy there to ride all the pens, find the sick ones, if there were any, and pull them out, drive them out of the pen onto this big common alley that we had that led to the doctor pen. I was lucky to have a pretty good Australian pup with me at that time, and we'd go in, my horse Bob, and he was named after a friend of my brother's who gave him the money to buy the horse, and his name was Bob. So I'd be riding Bob, and my dog Tiz. Did I tell you his name or where it came from? So whenever I'd go to feed him, I'd take his food in the dish and I'd say, "Here it is." So I'd set him up at the open gate to the pen of cattle. And I'd set him in the open gate, and he'd keep the cattle from going out. I'd ride the pen. If I found any sick ones, I'd drive them up to the gate, and I'd wave him to the side, and he'd get out of the way, and I'd drive the sick animal out into the alley. We'd ride all the pens, and after we rode the pens and gathered these sick cattle, I'd drive them down to the doctor pen. And the chute leading up to the squeeze, where I doctor the cattle, had a space about a foot up from the ground. And that was so that the dog could bring them forward by nipping at their heels. And so, and I was, as I said, the only cowboy there. So I'd be at the head catch. I'd have my dog bring him up. I'd doctor him, usually for pneumonia or dehydration. And I'd probably use some antibiotics like penicillin and then electrolytes. Then I let him out the gate, and then my dog would be sitting there, and I'd say, "Okay, go get another one." And I thought he was multilingual because he responded, "Hi." I didn't know he spoke Japanese. And he'd go back and bring another one up. That lasted for about a month. I mean, there was a month of no time off, every day, and my horse and my dog got pretty good at handling cattle. From there, I was hired away to a cow-calf operation on the Columbia River, about 30 miles from the Pacific Ocean, and it's on the banks of the river, made up of a bunch of small dairy farms, but we had, I think about 1,500 mother cows with the bulls on green pasture. And my job was to ride through these pastures, and if there's anything sick, treat them. The one event that I can talk about that maybe summarizes my time there was I was riding through this one pasture, and I think I was on Bob, maybe I was on another horse named Bananas. But anyway, had my dog with me, and I noticed this big, maybe she's a Bremer crossbred cow, obviously pregnant, and she had a prolapse of her uterus sticking out about that far. So I wasn't quite sure what to do, but I went ahead and followed her for a while and roped her by her 2 hind feet so that I could restrain her. And I got her up short with short rope, dallied around my horse's, my saddle horn, and tied off, stepped off with my doctor bag, which didn't have very much in it, as I said, but I reduced her uterus about that far back in and sewed her up with the point of my knife to make holes and sutured her up and tied her off with a buckskin shoestring that I had. So, I mean, she took it real well. And I was happy that when I did reduce her uterus back in, she kind of peed. And when she stood up, I let her up, and she stood up, she really peed. And that was a good sign. I had, as I said, about 1,500 cows to go through. I was the only cowboy, so it was a week and a half before I got back to that cow in her pasture. And what a feeling to find that cow in her pasture with no apparent ill effects. The buckskin, the string was gone, and she had a healthy bull calf sucking on her. Now, no one ever told me that life would be so fruitful for $385 a month.
Thanks, Louie. Yippee-ki-yay. Nicole Sweeney is a professional internet user and video editor caught in a lifelong battle between a love of travel and a hatred of putting on real pants. She loves maps, semicolons, and doing things that scare her. She struggles with writing personal bios and public speaking. Please welcome Nicole Sweeney. You can drink it. Okay. You can drink it. Okay. But just the warning.
I was not kidding about being nervous, so we're just gonna all kind of jitter through this together. For the last decade or so, negotiating the concept of home has been kind of complicated for me. I have lived in 5 different time zones. I went to school on 3 continents. But growing up, this was much simpler. I spent most of my childhood in LA, in the LA area, and that is what felt like home. That's the one that felt true. When I was in high school, my family moved from LA to Jefferson City, Missouri, which is a very tiny town, right in the middle of the show me state. At the time, I had purple hair, about as long as it is now, but like bright purple, and I fancied myself a city girl. I was not. Our home in the San Fernando Valley was dreamt up in some suburban cookie-cutter fairy tale, but I had ideas. I had some ideas. And I also had a lot of feelings about this move, as 15-year-olds do. The town is a very sort of Friday Night Lights vibe to it in terms of like the devotion to the high school football team. The bus rides to school involved, cow pastures out my window, which is not really a thing that I saw much of. And so I had a pretty contentious relationship with this town. I felt like I did not belong there. This place was not for me. I belonged to California. That's what I was. When I graduated from high school, though, I did not immediately go racing back to California. I went off to school in DC, and then I decided to go to graduate school in Paris, even though I didn't speak any French. I'm really good at making impulsive life decisions. Even when I try to plan, it's still sort of woefully disconnected from whatever that force is inside me that says, yeah, dive in, do the thing. Just always time to panic later. So, after a year of croissants on the Champ de Mars and drinking wine by the canal and also going to class and finishing my coursework, I decided that I was now going to do a responsible thing. I was going to be really responsible. And since my thesis was basically just internet stuff, I could do that pretty much from anywhere. So I decided that I would go home to my parents' house, save some money, and pound it out, get it done, be really responsible. I don't really know what that word means. It's like this vague adult concept that I am forever falling short of in some made-up way, but I was gonna do it. I was gonna be responsible. Shortly after getting back home, I went out to California to visit my best friend Anastasia and celebrate her engagement. It was a really big deal because spending most of our friendship kind of long distance, we did not get to be together for most of these big life moments, so being able to be there for her engagement was really exciting. And it made me really, nostalgic for California in a pretty big way. So I applied for an internship. It was this location-independent internship with this really cool startup company. And I was like, well, this is perfect, because then I can have something else to focus on while I'm writing my thesis, and then maybe at the end of it, I'll have a job lined up, which is really responsible. So I interviewed for this internship while I was visiting her. And instead of being offered the internship, I was offered an actual job of the show up, be at the office variety. Unfortunately, cool little startup also paid dirt and high fives. So not great, but I decided just whatever, I'm gonna do the thing, because that's what I do. So I took the job. I convinced myself that I would write my thesis on the weekends or something. I don't know. So I moved in with my best friend. She had this pull-out couch that she bought secondhand, and things were going pretty great. I had the most affordable rent in all of Los Angeles. Even with my very affordable rent, I also had very high student loan payments, so I had to get this weekend job that I hated at this rich people neighborhood where Kardashian lives. And clearly, I'm a very privileged person, but this introduced me to this whole other world of rich people problems that I had just never comprehended and really didn't want to know anything about. But every weekend, I drove myself out to my soul-sucking job, and aside from that, I loved everything else. Everything else was going great. My dirt and high five job was doing really well. I got to be there with my best friend and plan her wedding. Every night in this apartment was a big wedding planning slumber party thing. Things were going really great, and I was also really good at avoiding emails from my thesis advisor. So it's, living the dream. Unfortunately, Anastasia did eventually actually get married, and the plan was always that I had to go when that day came. The plans and I, though, don't really mix really well, so I couldn't really find anything. I also decided that I could not continue to drive out to Calabasas, so I quit that job. So I had less money, and you just can't beat the best friend rate. Randos on Craigslist don't offer that, it turns out. So I had the brilliant idea that the solution to the cost of living in Los Angeles is to not pay rent. If you don't pay rent, it's fine, right? So I got myself a storage unit and a membership to 24-hour fitness, and I moved into my car. So at the time, I did not tell anybody that I was doing this, because I assumed correctly that people were not going to approve of this life choice. I have since told everyone in my life that I was doing this, but the thing that I really have not admitted to anyone until like right now is that I truly thought this was a great idea. Like I was convinced that I had figured it out. And 24-hour fitness, I had a bathroom at all hours. It was great. And it's where I parked, was on a block in North Hollywood, just up the street from the 24-hour fitness. When I would get up every morning to go to the gym, I had a really great gym routine going because I had to work out, to shower. I couldn't, just use the shower at the gym. That would be weird, unlike sleeping in your car. Not weird. But when I would get up to go to the gym every morning, I saw there's a couple other cars on this same block that also had Midwestern state plates and fogged up windows. See you, Ohio. There's something oddly comforting and reassuring about that. Unfortunately, there's also like a constant anxiety about like not being seen. Probably the only time that I remember being genuinely afraid was the one night that I tried to sleep in the front seat. Just the visibility factor, not good. I love my car dearly. I have a convertible Mustang, it's real nice, but I don't know if you've ever tried to sleep in the backseat of a Mustang or just sit in it like at all. It's not comfortable, so that was a good time, but kind of piled under my blankets. Went to the beach every weekend. People in LA don't really do that, but I did because they have bathrooms. They're not great bathrooms, but wasn't really in a position to be selective. I tried really hard to make this thing work, but it turns out that all of the free time that I thought I was going to have to spend at the library was pretty consumed by like, where am I going to sleep? Where am I going to pee? Dagney, where can we poop? The questions, they are many. So, pretty constant. And eventually I had to sort of accept that this was not working out for me and I was going to have to go home. When I was telling this story the other day, the phrase homeless in your hometown was thrown out, and it was sort of jarring to me because I had never thought of myself as having been homeless. Like I thought of this as this stupid thing that I did once upon a time. And so that word is just sort of weird to me. But the actual kicker though is that I was in a position where in my hometown, I didn't feel comfortable telling anyone like, hey, can I sleep on your couch? That would be cool. Instead, I, packed up my life, which was already conveniently very packed up, and, returned to my parents in Missouri. And the idea of home, this whole hometown thing, turned out to be a lot more fraught and complicated than I had previously idealized it to be or imagined it to be. Except I will add that clearly I did not stay in Missouri. I did eventually write that thesis. Took me a very long time, but got it done. Several semesters enrolled in thesis. But I found myself here in Missoula, moved here in the dead of winter, and it was snowing the day that we unloaded all of my stuff from the truck and into my apartment. And a few strangers from my new job who had known me for all of a hot minute turned up to come help me unload all of my stuff in the snow. So, I don't know. Maybe it's not that complicated. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Oh, a couple other thank yous really quick here. Thanks again to the Wilma. Thanks to the bookstore at the University of Montana. Thanks to the Missoula Broadcasting Company for the PSAs and to the Top Hat for their continued support. I was wondering if you, all in the audience, have had a chance to tell your stories on those little sheets of paper. If you have, and you haven't dropped them in those little boxes, we want to go ahead and do that because, hang on a second. Who's thirsty? Let's have a quick little intermission, maybe 15 minutes. Lane, can you get us some lights, please? And excellent. And then as intermission is ending, oh, and one other thing really quick. Thanks, Nick, for reminding me. The upstairs bar is open too. We just opened the Sky Bar, so if you're thirsty up there, you don't have far to walk. You all can keep getting drinks if you want. We're just going to start this little part. This is my friend Carla. She's going to help me. Welcome her to Missoula. She just moved here recently. I met her at the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival where I was volunteering. Let's see, is this mic good for you right here? Okay, are you ready? Okay. I can go first. All right, so the question is, please share a short story about the last time something would have turned out differently if only someone had told you. Why didn't anyone tell me you can't flash people at the Badlander? I can keep going until you're ready. Yeah. Why didn't anyone tell me? I'm a very friendly and understanding person. Just because someone is weird doesn't necessarily mean we can't be roommates. But why the fuck didn't anyone tell me my potential roommate would be sitting on my couch at 8 a.m. in a robe drinking cocktails every morning while I was getting ready for work?
I gotta find the front page here. All right. I was cast in a feature film in LA. I was the lead in the feature film called The Black Duke. We had filmed several scenes in this incredible house that was perfect for a horror movie. After scheduling issues, filming was postponed. The producers emailed the cast and crew that we would pick up something later. After 2 weeks, I emailed the director and got no response. I emailed the producer and was told, our director has broken his leg. We need to postpone. 2 weeks later, another email from me. Email back said, our director has taken ill. Postponed again. Email from me 2 weeks later. Email back says, we'll keep in contact. 2 months go by. I turned down acting roles in anticipation for continuing the project. My final email to the producer, their response, so sorry no one told you. Our director had a stroke. He died. We canceled a month and a half ago. And I just learned that FML means fuck my life.
Why didn't anyone tell me? Once, I went to a job interview after having taken LSD the night before. And hooking up with 2 Czech dudes who had just won a bunch of money from track betting in Flagstaff, Arizona. At the job interview, the guy interviewing me kept staring at my chest, which pissed me off and made me think the guy was, I can't make it out, something, perv. Oh yeah, the guy was a perv. Thanks, Billy. Until I got into my car and realized my shirt was on inside out and backwards.
I adopted the cloth diapering gig when my first daughter was born, which is a nasty, impossible venture anyways. But one day, there was something extra in one of the diapers I had just washed. looking like a quarter-sized booger that wouldn't fit in any something, I realized that it was my daughter's umbilical cord, which had fallen off and rehydrated in the washing machine. That was the last straw. And I gave up conforming to crunchy mommy ideal. And seriously, why didn't anyone tell me I'd be so much happier spending my time with my new baby instead of apologizing over what to catch her poop with?
Yay, Mom, she says. All right, why didn't anyone tell me? My friend Natasha convinced me to join the Army our senior year of high school. I did little to nothing to prepare for basic training. At 3 a.m. on the first day, I was standing in the freezing rain with the drill sergeant 2 inches from my face. I turned to Tasha and asked, "Why are they yelling at us?"
Mark, can you make out that word? Studying abroad in Osaka could have been different if someone would have told me that they don't celebrate Halloween in Japan. Because it's pretty weird when you show up to class as a bowling pin that's 8 feet tall. The bus ride and the train ride were even more weird and awkward as well.
I'm gonna read two because the first one's really short. Why didn't anyone tell me that Mountain Dew isn't effective birth control? Google that shit. If Mom had told me that she knew, why didn't anyone tell me? If Mom had told me that she knew about her aortic aneurysm, then maybe she would have listened when I would have begged her to surgically repair it. If she had told me, maybe I could have seen her and told her that I love her before she was rushed into the repair surgery during which she died. I'm really sorry to hear that. Next. Ready?
Why didn't anyone tell me that my skirt was tucked in my tights all day? One time, when I was at band camp, I was working as a waiter at a fancy event. I was having a fun time talking to this woman. We were laughing and having fun. Why didn't anyone tell me it was Ann Coulter?
Wow. All right, we're getting towards the end of this whole thing. Why didn't anyone tell me? And I'm going to try our best to read this because it's hard. It's almost illegible. Why didn't anyone tell me? Freshman year, everyone in the dorms were talking about going to Connie's bar to see the band. Well, I was so stoked and eagerly went downtown. As it turns out, the Missoula punk scene was alive and well, and instead of hearing the waltz and Up on Cripple Creek, my roommate took a beer bottle to the show and mosh pit at the Band, B-A-N-N-E-D. Why didn't anyone tell me? We have 20 seconds. Why didn't anyone tell me that I couldn't swallow a cherry tomato whole? My throat was sore for 2 weeks.
I wish someone had told me that several people had died jumping off the Blue Hole Bridge. I survived the 80-foot fall, but it was easily the dumbest thing I've ever done.
Okay, this whole intermission thing is a little new, so I forgot to bring my notes, so I'm going to pull them up right now. Because we're about to get started again. Thanks, everybody who contributed your story. Your story might show up on Twitter if it's short enough. Oh, thanks, Carla. I'll be back to walk you down. Oh, Samuel, can you help her get out? Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Carla. Carla, everybody. All right, thanks everybody for being here once again. Thanks to the Missoula Community Foundation for fiscally sponsoring Tell Us Something. Thanks to Nick Chakota and the Wilma and the staff here at the Wilma. Thanks to the bookstore at the University of Montana and all the rest of our sponsors. Are you ready for the next storyteller? Thanks, Ellie. Juanita Vero is part of the 4th generation on a dude ranch in Greeno, Montana. She says it's like City Slickers meets Dirty Dancing meets The Horse Whisperer with A River Runs Through It and some Downton Abbey. I have to thank her dad for telling me that it wasn't Downtown Abbey. I never saw the show. Please welcome Juanita Vero.
Woo! My brother and I are really motivated by food. My little brother, we grew up about an hour east of here on a ranch and went to a little one-room schoolhouse down the road, and our favorite class was lunch. And this was in the 70s, and so we had these bright orange Tupperware lunch boxes that had been sitting under our desks all morning long. And so at noon, we get to peel back that soft, pliable plastic cover, and that waft, that special Tupperware stench would just come up. And we loved it. Probably didn't help that in our lunch boxes was unpasteurized cow's milk. Not because our parents were righteous hippies or anything, it's just that we had cows on the ranch and we drank, that's what the milk was that we drank, and it was not pasteurized. Also in our lunch boxes was last night's dinner slapped between 2 pieces of homemade bread. Again, not because mom was a righteous, I'm going to make everything by hand. It's just she made bread. We didn't buy bread. We lived too far from town. And occasionally we would get peanut butter and jelly on the sandwiches, and those were special days. And peanut butter and jelly was exciting, except most of the time peanut butter came with marmalade because we have to use up the marmalade. And who eats peanut butter and marmalade? Vomit. So my brother and I would covet, and we would be very just jealous of the other kids' lunch boxes. And these were tin lunch boxes with fantastic graphics of Star Wars and Dukes of Hazzard. And in those lunch boxes were Lunchables and fruit roll-ups and Capri Suns and colorful candy, stuff that we were never allowed. My brother, though, he was a wheeler and dealer, and he was fantastic at trading and conniving. And I, on the other hand, I took the sour grapes route. I said that only bad people ate that kind of stuff. And this was during the Save the Whales campaign, and Greenpeace was really out there, trying to prevent harp seal pups from getting clubbed. And so in my mind, I was like, only whalers drink Capri Sun, and clubbers, seal clubbers, are out there with their Lunchables, and litter bugs drink pop. You know, that's what I thought. Bad, trashy people would eat sugar cereals with store-bought 2% milk. And it's funny I said trashy, but we lived in a double-wide trailer on a ranch, so, I mean. And when we came home from school, we weren't allowed inside until dinner was ready. And during the summer, this ranch is a dude ranch, and so we served all the choice cuts of beef to our guests. And during the off-season, we would eat burger, liver, heart, tongue. Occasionally it would be, but it was good. It was good. Mom makes amazing liver and onions and tongue. And then Dad would get an elk or a deer, not because of some like back to the land, I'm going to provide for my family philosophy. It's just we were tired of eating organ meat. Mom hunted too, but she didn't hunt so much until, after us kids came along. And then we would have these food service cans of insipid vegetables. It was diced carrots and gray peas, and I'm sure the cans were lined with everything that you're not supposed to line cans with now. And then we would have rice, and rice was a nod to my dad's Filipino heritage. And we would drown our entire dinner in soy sauce, which our dad called bug juice, and my little brother and I just reveled in asking, please pass the bug juice. And we were very excited about that. About once a year, we got to go visit our grandmother in Colorado, and this meant that we got to ride on an airplane. And Frontier Airlines had a flight from Missoula to Denver, and our grandmother lived in Grand Junction. And airplanes were really exciting because you get to dress up and wear your good underwear. And for me, I could wear a dress or a skirt, which I would inevitably tuck the back into my stockings when I would come out of a public restroom. There's someone else in here who does that too. But the best part about airplanes was food. We get salted peanuts and honey roasted salted peanuts and pop, and food would come in, our meals would come in little compartments or plates that were compartmentalized and separate all the food types, and my brother and I just loved that. When we arrived to our grandmother's, there was always this kind of air of stress. And my grandmother was a very regal woman. She was tall and kind of lockjawed and had the long neck that looked like it had a couple extra vertebrae in it. And she had an immaculate home. It was beautiful, but everything was pale blue, beige, sage green. Children weren't allowed on the furniture. We had to sit on the floor next to the furniture. Furniture was for adults. We also knew that our mother was kind of stressed out. We were excited to be there, but it was stressful, in part because we kind of knew, but didn't really judge, that our grandmother didn't like us. And this was because our mother had married our Filipino cowboy father, who really didn't offer the family much materially. Never mind the fact that our grandmother had run off with another woman's husband to Colorado, leaving our grandfather on the ranch to shack up with a housekeeper who was only 4 years older than our mother. Very exciting. But we didn't judge. Again, we're children. We don't really understand the affairs of adults. We were more concerned about what was for dinner. And dinners were a really grand affair. We would have the candles would be perfectly laid or lit, and silverware would be going east and west and north and south around our plates, and there was like always a forest of glassware up in the northeast quadrant, and you had to use the right utensil in the correct hand for the correct piece of food to bring it to your mouth. And then you had to drink from the correct glass, and you need to have the proper beverage in the correct glass. And we were really excited because we would get served wine in a sherry glass, and we just felt so accomplished. Never mind the fact that when we weren't eating, we'd have to sit at the side, or we'd have to sit our thumbs on the edge of the table to keep us from fidgeting. We had to be very still at the table. Our grandmother's husband would gallantly carve a Canada goose that he had shot, and he'd be standing at the head of the table carving away, and we would have wild rice, which looked nothing like rice at all. And we just knew without being told that it was forbidden to ask for the bug juice, so we did not. But we loved the artichokes that we could pick off the leaves and then dip them in hollandaise sauce, and our grandmother would say hollandaise as if the H did not exist. And we would dip and then scrape the flesh from the bottom, from our lower teeth, and then very neatly place them on the discard plate, and we had to keep perfect circles and stacked very neatly and layered. And the best part is we didn't have to finish the artichoke. We didn't like the hearts. They were like thorny and weird looking. And our mother loved them. And so we could give our mother our artichoke hearts, and we didn't have to clean our plate. It was the only time we didn't have to do that. But before dinner were cocktail parties, and these were fabulous. Not only did we have our very own Shirley Temples with a couple maraschino cherries and cherry juice in the glass, but there was food. And incredible creations. My grandmother would spend hours crafting and constructing these creations. And they were like all sorts of stinky cheeses and, whimsically whittled vegetables and fruit and revolting pâtés and crackers and toast points that were adorned with all sorts of concoctions that represented the entire plant and animal kingdom on top of a tiny cracker. And my brother and I loved them, but the deal was is we could only sample an appetizer once we had passed them to all the adults in the room. So my brother and I were on it. It was like every 90 minutes, adult was getting an appetizer plate in their face. So 90 minutes, I meant 90 seconds. We were on it. And I just got the gong, so I'm hurrying up here. But our favorite hors d'oeuvre of all was these kind of luminous, they white, and they almost kind of looked like Lincoln logs. And there was a very particular way that we could eat them, and you had to peel them very carefully, peel them lengthwise. And we were only allowed, with the loving glare of our mother, we knew that we were only allowed to take a section that was only the width of dental floss. And these were magnificent, magical things that just were so soft, and they felt like embroidery threads, and they had just this vaguely nutty, maybe salty flavor, but it was mostly just a divine nothingness. And we put them on our tongue, and my brother and I would watch each other very seriously, and because God forbid the other one took a bigger string than a piece of dental floss. And this was the most kind of spiritual, the closest thing to the sacrament that my brother and I ever had. Fast forward 10 years, we don't see our grandmother for over a decade. Adult tensions, life gets in the way. We have this kind of vague falling out. I go off to hoity-toity prep school that in New England that my grandmother pays for. I'm not really squaring it because she doesn't like us, but she's paying for me to go. I'm not going to ask questions. I don't really want to untangle that. I'm just going. My brother goes to the US Army, where he becomes a Black Hawk helicopter pilot, and then I end up at a hippie liberal arts school in Portland, Oregon. So it's in Portland, Oregon, where I met Fred Meyers, which is like Albertson's Shopko kind of thing. And I'm getting my weekly college student ration of ramen, because that's what you do. And my favorite is Top Ramen, because you can get 5 packages for $1. And the best is the chicken sesame, because the sesame oil comes in this neat little packet. And I also like to add a raw egg to the last 30 seconds of my ramen, because that's what Dad did. So I'm scooting over to the dairy section to get my half dozen eggs. And I'm standing next to this end cap catches my eye. It's about 3 feet wide, 6 feet tall, and it's just stocked with these glowing white Lincoln logs. And I'm staring at them, and it's string cheese. It's called string cheese. It's 12 packs of string cheese for $2.87. And I'm staring at it, and it's like, this shock and explosion of mental life montage kind of like is in my head. And I'm thinking of my grandmother and the stress of family and responsibilities and of course money and how does it all fit in? And I'm like, is my grandmother a fraud? Is my family a fraud? And then obviously next, am I a fraud? Why didn't anyone tell me? String cheese, $2.87.
String cheese incident. Thanks, Juanita. Sawyer Connelly spends less time flooding houses these days and more time working to protect the indomitable Western landscape. Originally from Northern England, Sawyer found his way to the West, to Colorado for college. A few months ago, the allure of adventure, not knowing a person, a job offer, and trout brought him to Missoula. Unsure of where he's going, he's sure it'll be exciting, involve public land, and hopes it'll someday make for a good memoir. Please welcome Sawyer Connelly.
I'm standing backstage, and I'm really nervous. So I reach for the nearest bottle of liquor. It's a fifth of Juarez tequila. And I take a big swig that doesn't go down as smoothly as I'd like. I'm nervous for a few different reasons. The first, that my father, my then girlfriend, and 3 of my best friends are sitting on the other side of the curtain in the audience. I'm pretty sure 4 of them, everyone except my father, is a little drunk. And I'm concerned about what they might say in the coming 2 hours about me, particularly related to the content of the production that I'm about to be in. Second reason I'm nervous is because I'm about to perform in my school's version of the Vagina Monologues. My school, it's called Relations, and it includes penises. And it's a celebration of sexual culture and the relationships on campus. We deal with some really funny issues and more serious issues like sexual assault and rape. And it's just a really, really great experience. I'm also nervous, the third reason, because one of the monologues I'm about to deliver is entitled Addicted to Pussy. And the college president, who I've been working with really closely with some extracurricular material, she's sitting in the audience. And I'm worried she's going to have a different view of me after this. But the main reason I'm nervous is because my castmate is going to be delivering a monologue I wrote that's about masturbation and flooding my father's study. Now, my father knows his study was flooded, but he doesn't know how. And this is my comical way of, which is very quickly becoming less comical in my mind, of telling him the full story. So, as an 11-year-old boy, I was like most 11-year-old boys, a horny little shit, and just discovering puberty and masturbation. And in the age of the internet, nudie pics came from the World Wide Web, you know, boobs. And in 4th or 5th grade, you know, a few of us boys, probably like 10 of us, you'd print these, like, they were like Playboy pictures. You'd print them out, really pixelated on regular, like 60-pound printer paper, 8.5 by 11, and they'd get passed around the classroom, and inevitably someone would take them home, and, well, we know where that goes. So, you know, as an 11-year-old, the masturbation spot at the time was the maple hardwood floors of the upstairs bathroom. And I once left those pictures on the bathroom floor, and to my absolute horror, my mother found them. Now, she was super cool about it. She even gave them back to me. She left them on my desk. And next time I saw her, she said, "Sawyer, you left something in the bathroom. I put it on your desk." Now, I was mortified, and I had to get rid of these, and they needed to go someplace where they would never be found. And the trash can wasn't good enough. Burning them wasn't going to suffice. They needed to go someplace dark and deep. And I thought the sewers would be a good spot. So, my parents, who ran a newspaper, a weekly newspaper, Tuesday night was production night. And they would always work late. So the Tuesday night, I was going to get rid of the evidence, and it was going to be gone. So I took those 3 pieces of printer paper and crumpled it up into 3 wads and threw them in the toilet. And I flushed the toilet. The toilet got clogged. So I flushed again, and the toilet got a little more clogged, and I started to get a little more nervous. So I flushed a 3rd time with a little more force, and I heard a pop. And you know that when a toilet's filling up and it starts to reach the point of being filled and it starts to slow down, you can hear the water shut off. Well, that wasn't happening. And the toilet bowl was filling up and up and up. Pretty soon it reached the brim, and it started to overflow. And I'm standing there, I don't know what to do. And as the water is spilling over onto my feet, I realize that my father's study is right below me. And in my father's study, there's a few thousand books. There's his computer in his desk with a lot of sentimental family photos and various journalism awards from over the years. And that water is very soon going to be going through the floor into my father's study. So, my 11-year-old mind thinks to grab every possible towel I could find in the bathroom and upstairs of the house and throw it on the floor around the toilet. Now, there were about 15, 20 towels, and that worked for a few minutes, but the water wasn't going to stop anytime soon, and eventually those towels reached their saturation point, and they couldn't hold any more water. So I ran into my parents' bedroom and picked up the phone to try to call down to the newspaper, but being a Tuesday, it was a busy night, and the line was busy. So I sprinted downstairs, and just as I got to my father's study, a bunch of the ceiling tiles fell out, and to my 11-year-old eyes, it looked like the Ganges, the Amazon, and the Mississippi were pouring down from above into my father's study. So I went to grab the phone again and tried calling the office. No luck. So I hightailed it out the back door, lights on, doors wide open, and sprinted. Luckily, I grew up in a very small town, and the house wasn't too far from my parents' office, and pretty sure I was setting a record for a sub 4-minute mile. Got to the office, burst through the front door, and just screamed, "Mom, you gotta come home. So the toilet's broken, Dad's study's getting flooded, I don't know what to do." So she sprints home with me and says some choice words as she runs by the study, and we get upstairs, and lo and behold, there's a little knob next to the toilet, shuts off the water. So We had to air out a few hundred books in my father's study, try them out. Some of them, to this day, still show the wavy pages from that incident. We had to replace the entire ceiling. But my evidence, the pictures were gone for good, and that was the important part. My parents didn't know how this happened. So, jumping back forward, our production goes really well. I'm greeted at the end by drunken hugs from all my friends and a big hug from my father. And being a supportive parent, he tells me how thrilled he was and how proud of me he is and how much my mother would have loved it. And we clean up and everything. And then as we're walking out of the theater, I say, "So, Pops, what do you think of the story about the study, not knowing if he's going to throttle me or, don't know how this went over?" And he chuckles and says, "Thought it sounded pretty familiar. Just, Sawyer, I wish someone had told you how to shut off the water." Thank you.
Thanks, Sawyer. Svein Newman was born in Norway, and he was kicked out of that country as a child for being bad at skiing. True story. He has roamed around Montana ever since. He grew up on a family farm in south central Montana, went to college here at the University of Montana, and after a 6.5 year stint in Billings, which he loves, he's excited to be back in Missoula. When he's not busy being afraid of speaking on stage, Svein works for conservation and family agricultural nonprofit called Northern Plains Resource Council. He volunteers towards refugee resettlement with Soft Landing, Missoula, and enjoys divey cowboy bars, day hikes, and settlers of Catan. Please welcome Svein Newman.
Wow. So I woke up at 5:08 a.m. on June 2nd, 2014, and I remember that time very distinctly. And I woke up to what sounded like some belligerent jerk shouting in the hallway and banging on the wall or banging on doors, and my first thought was, God, it's early to be that drunk. And I presumed, and I think this is fair, I presumed that it was just some guy who'd been locked out of his apartment, his roommate had let him back in, it'd be over in 30 seconds, and so I proceeded to try and go back to sleep, but after a couple of minutes it was still going on. And I thought, fine, I guess I'll go deal with it. So I get up and I put on pants because I've knocked on enough doors for political candidates that I know that it's awkward when the person behind the door isn't wearing any pants. And I go to the door and I throw it open to give this guy a piece of my mind, and I start, "Hey," and I stop because it's not one guy, it's two guys. There are police officers and the hallway's filled with smoke. And they shout, "The building's on fire, get out, get out, get out." And at that point, I can't be like, "I really would have picked a different outfit, just a second, I'll be right back." And so I rushed out of the building wearing these pants, actually. And thank you. And I spend the next 3 hours sitting on the stoop across the street watching my home burn down. And it's hard to say exactly how I responded in that situation because it doesn't feel this way, but when I tell the story, it sounds like I was maybe in shock or wasn't quite processing because I was just cracking jokes, saying things like, "Well, that's what I get for keeping my fireworks next to my oily rag collection," which incidentally is a terrible thing to say next to a police officer when they haven't figured out what started the fire yet. And just in case my landlords are in the audience, it wasn't me. There was a thorough investigation. And it wasn't me. But a buddy and I make the track list for the relief dance party with songs like We Didn't Start the Fire, Burning Down the House. You know, we get through like 20 or 30 tracks because we've got a while. And I text my boss and say, probably not coming into work today. My apartment building is burning down. Hashtag thanks Obama. And she responds, well, feel free to take tomorrow off too, but what does the president have to do with this? And that was when I learned that there's kind of a generation gap with that joke, so if you don't get it, then ask your kids. But I learned a few other things in the fire experience too, and one of those things is that some people are just jerks. They just are. So the fire had been burning for about an hour, and they'd brought in the third fire truck to spray millions of gallons of water on this building. And my car was, parked in front of the building. It was kind of blocking the way, but fortunately in this instance, I'm a little bit lazy, and so I had my credit card and my car keys in yesterday's pants that I'd pulled on. And so I go to remove my car, I get in, I turn it on, and I find out that all of the street exits are blocked. They've been closed off by the police and by the fire department, and so I pull into this guy's driveway, and he comes out, and he's apparently an attorney, and he lets me know that he has trial in 2 hours, and so I need to move my car. And I point across the street, and I try to explain to him that while I appreciate his concern, my home is on fire, and he won't hear it. And he says he's going to call the police, and I say they're standing over there. Let's go talk to them together. But he doesn't hear it, so he starts yelling at his wife to yell at me to move my car, and so I get into my car and I drive across people's lawns to get it out. But I also learned, and I mostly learned, that people are really wonderful, right? Because while my friend and I were joking about the playlist for that dance party, it turns out that other friends were actually planning one to raise money to replace things. And some different friends had started this online Kickstarter account, and people started getting a hold of me right away saying, hey, do you need anything? My husband and I were thinking about getting a new couch, and here's a photo of our old one. I don't know if it's good enough for you. And the nice thing about being in your 20s is you don't have great stuff. And so I had to try and find a diplomatic way to say that's way nicer than the free couch I pulled out of the rainy alley before. So in a sense, I made out like a bandit. Another important lesson that I learned is that emotions are contagious or infectious. And so that first night of the fire, my friend Vic took me out to dinner, and God bless Vic, because we're talking about the story, and at some point he just stops me mid-sentence and says, wait a minute, Svein, do you think that they're going to have to demolish the building, tear down the walls, gut everything out? And I'm like, well, I don't see what that has to do with what I was saying, but yeah, sure. And he says, well then, Svein, this is a tragedy, all right, but this is also an opportunity that you and I have never had before and may never have again, because I'm just saying that if a couple of dudes showed up with some sledgehammers and started knocking things down, they probably wouldn't mind. And he volunteers to help me gather my things, or sort of filter through the wreckage to try and find things the next day with clearly ulterior motives. And I show up, and the property management gal meets me on site, and she hands me my security deposit check, and she's crying, so I start crying, but then Vic shows up. And An important point of backstory with Vic. Vic used to work in the oil fields, and not like the North Dakota, Eastern Montana oil fields. We're talking the backcountry Alaska, they have to helicopter you in oil fields. And so he comes with his big truck and his like industrial coveralls and his boots up to his knees, and he has this big breathing mask on. Like, I don't really understand. It looks like an alien. Like, I don't even get it. And I'm wearing the one pair of jeans and t-shirt that I own at this juncture. And I tell him, Vic, I really don't think we're going to need all of that. And he says to me, shh. Don't spoil the moment. I couldn't find my baseball bat. We're going to have to use our fists. And he's brought his like portable speaker system in some like waterproof bag, and so we spend the day rocking out to 90s dance beats. And we go to the grocery store and we get multiple brands of paper towels to figure out which is actually really the most absorbent. And a few people have asked me, well, did you save anything? And the answer is yes. Which was really great at the time, because that first day, the fire chief in Billings says, kid, I don't want to sugarcoat anything. You definitely lost everything, which is not a great thing to say to a person in that situation. But we were able to salvage some things. I had some clothes that had, there was a lot of smoke damage. They'd been poured, probably a couple million gallons of water poured over them. But I took them to the laundromat that day. Actually, there was a full day at the laundromat with Vic, bless him again. And I had a lot of hope, and then after the first wash, I lost all hope. But by the end of the day, it just smelled like I really liked camping. Which is okay in Montana, right? You can pull that off. But the important thing, or the most important lesson that I learned is that stuff is just stuff. I don't know how many of you read Tom Sawyer when you were in school. That's great. I didn't, but I did read the Cliff Notes and watch the movie. And I remember there's a season, see, I'm talking like TV and movies. You know how I operate. I'm giving away all my secrets. But there's this scene early on where they're trying to establish that Tom is such a scamp. And so his raft washes into town and he's lost. It only has a shirt on it. There's no buoy. And so everybody assumes that he must be dead. And so they plan this funeral for him. And he comes back and finds out they're planning a funeral. And instead of saying, wait, oh my God, I'm still alive, you have it all wrong, he thinks, oh, I have to see this. Right, and ever since that moment, I've had the same, lingering question, and obviously I would never do it. But I go to people's funerals and I think, oh my gosh, what I would give to live a life that's deserving of this kind of recognition or this kind of funeral. And God willing, and the creek don't rise, this is the closest I'll ever get to that. Because, people, the people who called, the people who wrote, the people who came forward, this is a story about me losing nearly everything that I own. But to me, it's not a story of loss. It's a story about realizing how much I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Svein. We have one more storyteller. Before I introduce her, I'd like to say a few thank yous to some of our sponsors and give you some info about some upcoming events. So thank you to our biggest sponsor, Joyce Gibbs. For those of you who don't know, Joyce Gibbs is my wife. She is incredible. She puts up with so much, and she makes beautiful jewelry, and she's really witty. She made this awesome t-shirt that says, it's an outline of the state of Montana, and it's got a little jackalope jumping through Billings. And it says, nature makes me horny. Joyce is incredible, and so I just want to give her a huge shout out. And if you see her, she's got a pink Tell Us Something t-shirt on tonight. So give her a high five or give her a hug or let her know how much you appreciate everything she does, because she's incredible. I don't even know where she is right now. I can't see her. Thanks to the Missoula Community Foundation for fiscally sponsoring Tell Us Something. Thanks to the bookstore at the University of Montana for their continued support. Thanks to the Wilma and the staff. Fact and Fiction Books, the Top Hat. And the next Tell Us Something event is in Missoula is May 3rd, but it's not a storytelling event. We will be participating in a one-day online day of giving called Give Local Missoula County. Tell Us Something costs money to run, and this is your opportunity to support. The money that we raise at the door is not enough to pay for everything that the costs that we incur. Our sponsors help us in that way. We would like to make Tell Us Something sustainable. We need your help to do that. May 3rd is a 24-hour day of giving. I think 120 nonprofits in Missoula are participating. Give Local Missoula is putting it on, Missoula Community Foundation, who fiscally sponsor us. They're putting it on, so mark that on your calendars. Last year was our first year participating. We had 63 donors. This year we're hoping to triple that at least. So with your help, we can do that. The next Tell Us Something storytelling event is going to actually be at the Top Hat, and that is June 22nd. The theme is bad advice. I think on your slip it says June 21st, but it's actually June 22nd, bad advice. And we, I believe, still have open storytelling slots. So if you want to tell a story at that one or any other future Tell Us Something event, the way to do that is to go to tellussomething.org, and all of the dates and themes are listed. You can click on the one that resonates with you and sign up on a little spreadsheet that opens up. There's a required workshop, and the date for the workshop is listed on that spreadsheet. Katrina Farnum is a local herbalist with a passion for plants, fungi, and the wild, untamed niches that are waiting all around us. Born in Montana and full of spit and vinegar, she works daily to change stigmas that stunt us as a culture from moving forward fully with passion and integrity. Please welcome Katrina Farnum.
Nice to be here. That was an amazing run-up of people, and I just want to say thanks to Mark Moss. If we could just give him a huge round of applause. Awesome. So I was always warned growing up about the dangers of drug addiction and what that might look like if you happen to fall into that peril. The opportunities that might be lost, friendships that might be lost, and all those other things that they attached with that. But what nobody ever told me was that love could be like a drug, and that you could end up in a relationship that resembled drug addiction. And that's exactly what happened to me. I had gone through this breakup, and it was terrible, and it was really painful, and it was devastating. But I was on the up and up, I was on the mend, and so I was feeling like, yeah, all right, you put yourself out there, and that's when I met Sam. And, things were great at first, and I thought this was the perfect person to date. I thought this is gonna be the best rebound relationship. I'm coming out of this heartache, and I could tell, you have that great sense of intuition about somebody, like this is not a good long-term relationship, This is a fantastic rebound. I can just pop in there and we can have fun. He was very charismatic. He was very charming and a go-getter. And he was moving to Canada. He was gonna go live in Fernie and he was gonna snowboard there. And I thought, perfect, there's no breakup. We already have this planned. It's in the initial stages. We know it's happening. And so cool, we got this like rebound planned. And it was a little longer of a rebound than I had thought, by 7 years. And they were some of the hardest 7 years of my life. And I really got to look at what that relationship it becomes like substance abuse, and essentially it is. I look at it now and I think it's a lot like chemical romance. The ups are so up and the downs are so down. And I ended up in a position that I was essentially fighting for my life. And all those things that they warned you about, the potential loss of friendships, losing things that are important to you, did happen to me to some extent, but I don't know that people always realize how much you struggle. I don't know that we always see each other's darkest hours. And I think that because when we retreat to those places, we keep them very close and we sort of hide them. But I wanted out. I wanted to leave. I wanted to leave it all behind and get away from him. So we did this back and forth thing for so long. And there were so many times that I felt so broken. There was a point at which I had been working on this story. I love to write, and I'd been working on this story, and I was in love with the characters. There was one character who made weird things out of bread, and like you can bake them and glaze them, and they will last forever, and she would make like little figurines and flowers, and she had a twin sister, and I felt really connected to these characters. And I got to this place where I was like, yeah, I'm really doing it. And then I'm not sure what he was looking at on my computer that he didn't want me to know about, but he took it to the computer guys and he had them completely erase my hard drive, and I didn't have anything backed up. And when I would go to him and say, this is how I feel and I'm devastated and this is so hard and why are we doing this? And he would say something like, those are really pretty earrings. Have you had those for a while? And it's so weird. You're just looking at this person like, God, I love you. And I need to get away from you. And I worked really hard at times. So there was a period where I moved out of my house and I moved in with family and I started looking for a new job, quit my job, started a new job, dropped my cell phone, got a new phone number. I had a new house, I had a new car, I had a new job, everything. I was like, yeah, he's not gonna get me, I'm starting over, this is awesome. And bam, he'd show up at my work. And it was just like that. It's that moment where an addict has cleaned up and they're doing so good and they're like on it and they're making it, it's happening. And they've changed their environment so that they can make that transition. And then they're in that place and that thing is passed to them. That offering is made. And for me, I just felt like maybe I was overreacting. Like maybe it wasn't as bad as I made it out to be. Maybe I should give this another shot. Like maybe it'll work. And so I would. So I did. And I wasn't overreacting, and it was terrible, and it would be immediate 2 days after we were together again. But then it's kind of like, yeah, but I already just reinvested myself, so I gotta like plug away at it, which is never a good idea. And we ended up buying a house together, which is bizarre to its own right, why we do these things. And it got really gnarly, and it just got to this point where we were sleeping in these separate bedrooms. And I mean, I was young, and I was already at that like creepy, weird place that you do in a midlife crisis. And I decided, this is it. I'm not doing this anymore. I am marching down there, and I am gonna tell him that we are either in it, and we are gonna move forward, and we're gonna make this work out, or we are splitting up. Like, I'm not limboing. There's no in-between anymore. So I got it, and I know what I'm gonna say, and I felt like he was never listening to me and that I wasn't validated, but I'm going for it. And I walk down the stairs, and I walk into his room, and it's dimly lit because it's evening, and he has his little lamp on, and he's propped up on pillows in his bed with the blankets pulled up, and he's working on a crossword puzzle. And I'm standing inside the doorway, and I say, so, I feel like you never hear me. I feel like I try to say things, but that you're not really listening, and I'm trying to get to the whole part about we need to move forward or get away from each other, and he just nods off. And his head, his chin just collapses against his chest. And something snapped in me, like a fucking crazy bitch just came erupting out. And, right? And I hear myself say, you might sleep through me, but you will not sleep through this. And then I started with the dresser in his room, and in just one awesome bitchy motion, I just leveled it, and I did have an aloe vera plant that was mine on it, so it wasn't like I was just leveling his stuff. And then I rolled into the living room, and by this point, I didn't care who was watching or listening, if neighbors could hear me, or if he was even awake yet, which he was, and he was after me, but I was like, zhong, 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 all over, level, 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 all my hippie crystals and rocks and plants and books and pots and pans and mixers and cookie trays, and really anything that was exposed on a surface, which anyone that knows me knows that there's no empty surfaces in my life. So I'm leveling them all, and it's awesome, and I feel pretty good, actually. Like, I'm mastering this, because I'm done. I am done 7 years, this is bullshit, I'm over it. So he comes after me, right? And then he gets his hands around my neck, and he's like, you crazy bitch, stop it, and I'm wailing on his chest. But he sees me, and he is like devastated. She's done. She's over it. And I was. And it was a powerful feeling, because I knew none of that bullshit that he had been feeding me, like when he would show up and he would say, I've been hiking all these mountains all day long, and all I do is think about you because you are my soulmate. But really, he was just like, I've been fucking tons of other chicks, and now I'm back in town, so, let's do this. So none of that was really working anymore. And, I made the separation happen, and it's not easy, right? Because you think that that's the victory moment, but it's like, that's the high, and now you're gonna go through the low, but you can't go back. And it got to that point where it's just like, oh, because I loved him, Wasn't that I didn't love him. And my heart was so heavy, and it was hard to eat, and it was hard to sleep, and it was hard to think straight. It was hard to go to work, but I would crawl on my hands and knees to get to the front door so that I could get to my car, so I could go get groceries, so I can continue living. And it was a fight for my life. And I fought every day for as many days as it took. And I had to start looking at myself, like, what am I doing, and what am I responsible for? And how can I change what I'm doing so that I don't keep doing that? And I did make mistakes. I didn't come out of that experience just free and clear and new page, happy ever after. I got to a place where I rebounded again after that. And I made poor choices. I ended up in a relationship with a person I loved dearly, and he was a raging alcoholic, and that didn't work out. And I had to go back to the drawing table and say, what am I doing? What is this? What is in me? What is my compulsion? And I had been really looking for somebody that was the right person for a really long time. I wanted to love, and I wanted to be in that relationship, and I was looking and not finding it. So I just started to work on myself. And I started looking at what attitudes that I carried. And, I really had to look at my defensiveness, because I was a very defensive person, and that was part of my problem. That was something I needed to work on. So I worked on that, and I did a lot of visualization. I visualized where I wanted to go, and I knew I wanted to get there. And it was so challenging, because I realized that the place that I had been was comfortable. It was so uncomfortable, but it was comfortable because I knew what to expect. I knew that that unhappiness was gonna be there. What I didn't know was what that other place that I was gonna go was gonna look like, and that scared the shit out of me, even though it had the potential to be so much better. So I just started visualizing what I wanted in a relationship. But I started with myself and what relationship I needed to have with myself, and I worked tirelessly at it. And when I met my husband, I didn't know he was gonna be my husband. And he was goofy, and he was athletic, and he was sweet, and I would get his name wrong, and we ended up being really great friends. And he kind of, I don't know if it was accident or not, but he swept me off my feet. And I was a little leery, both because I wasn't sure that I was there, that I had done the work that I needed to do. And at one point in the beginning of our relationship, I said to him, I think I'm too mean for you. I think I might be too rough around the edges because you are so nice and you're so sweet. And he said, no, I think in the end that you'll be a little nicer and I'll be a little meaner and it'll all work itself out. Okay, I can work with that. But I really didn't want him to be meaner because he's so wonderful. And, there was just so much that he did that was so different. And it was really refreshing to feel that. I remember in days when they'd just be hard days, as we all have. And I don't even remember what was happening that day, but I remember he looked at me and I was sad and he said, I am gonna kiss that frown right off your face. And I thought, now that is a guy. And he was so devoted to his family and is so devoted to his family that became something that was so close to my heart. Like anyone that can devote themselves to their family in that way and love them so unconditionally, I knew that I would also receive that treatment. And so I married him because he's wonderful and amazing and makes, I am a better version of myself every day, and he supports everything that I do wholeheartedly. And I really had to come back and re-review where I had been and where I was going. And I realized that I had been, putting so much and investing so much all those years in finding the right person. And in the end, it wasn't about that. In the end, it was about just being the right person. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. And thank you all tonight for coming out. Thank you for supporting live storytelling. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Please go and support them and let them know that you appreciate their support. Thank you to our storytellers, Susan Hansen, Dagney Deutchman, Jennie Pack, Louie Vero, Nicole Sweeney, Juanita Vero, Sawyer Connelly, Svein Newman, and Katrina Farnum. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you June 22nd at the Top Hat.